Welcome back to Morbidly Bewitched. This is the final of a three-part trilogy I had going to do with the Franklin expedition. Stay tuned. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. And for all of you podcast lovers, I have started a series under the same name, Morbidly Bewitched, and you can find that on Spotify and Stitcher and Podbean. If you have been watching, and I hope you have, then you'll know that I have been covering the Franklin expedition, and it would only be right to end this trilogy with the two ladies themselves, the Erebus and the Terror, who were eventually found. For anybody who has SubMechanophobia like myself, you'll probably find this just as intriguing as I did. Now, SubMechanophobia is a fear of man-made objects within the depths of a watery area or body. So I love swimming, go swimming a couple of times a week, but if you were to chuck, say, a bog standard telephone into the pool, I would be a bit weary of getting in. Odd, I know. These two ladies were, as we know, home to the doomed Franklin expedition crew. And if you've got a morbid imagination as I do, you must find it intriguing to think of the blood, sweat and tears that would be soaked into the timber and bellies of their hulls during their final hours being crushed on the ice to atoms before her crew abandoned the both of them in 1848 after 18 months of strangulation in the ice, before the sea eventually claimed her prize like a giant serpent, eating the two vessels down into their watery graves. Both the HMS Terror and the HMS Erebus were originally built as bomber ships for the Royal Navy. The bomber ships were the choice for polar expeditions because they were so robust. They had reinforced iron plating along their hulls and the bow of the ship to break through ice. These two ladies, on the other hand, gave special treatment because they were retrofitted for this voyage with even further iron plating and cladding along her belly and her front, the bow, and she was also fitted with a locomotive steam engine. Both of them were. They had just had their wheels removed and embedded into the bellies of these vessels to power them through if they got into trouble. Now, these steam engines were only supposed to be put into use if the ladies got into trouble out on the ice, so there was a limited supply of coal put on board. They also boasted state-of-the-art cooking stoves, and these stoves had built in above them these giant tanks that were designed to melt the snow into drinking water. The surplus heat from the steam engine and these giant stoves that were used about 22 hours a day by the onboard cooks were also used to heat these vessels with a 1845 version of central heating. Now, some boat nerd facts that I'm going to have to actually read off because there's no way I would remember saying it. But the Erebus was built in 1826. She was 105 foot long, 28.5 feet wide, and weighed in at 372 tons. Her sister, the HMS Terror, was built in 1813 and was 102 foot long, 27 feet wide, and she weighed in at 325 tons. The Erebus was the faster, larger ship out of the two, but yet the Terror was slightly more robust and sturdier. And these two girls were a sight to behold in 1845 when they set sail. Now, it is actually, to me, quite sad that these two feats of engineering now lie in watery graves in the Pacific Ocean. But this cruel environment also lends a hand to another spectacular phenomenon: preservation. These two majestic ships lay undisturbed for 166 years, until our research team carrying out an expedition looking for the Erebus and Terror came across them in, well, the first one was Erebus in 2014. The reason it took so long to find them was, well, one, they didn't have the technology to carry out such an extensive search, and secondly, Erebus and Terror were both quite off the charts compared with the final notes left in the cairns by the crew that left the two ladies. The pack ice carried the two ships so far, and then as they melted down through the glaciers, as it gave way and the seasons broke, they probably still carried as they clung on before they gave way and dropped to their watery resting place for eternal slumber. Now, this is going to require my chart. This is the Erebus in blue, and this is the Terror. They sunk, according to the coordinates by the team, roughly just off King William Island. I believe it might have been lower than that, probably. This was the last known destination for the girls, but the pack ice dragged them, and well, Terror had drifted before the water let her go, and she landed approximately 60 miles south of the last known coordinates, and they found her in and around the base of King William Island, roughly around here. And they found Erebus a further 30 miles south of her original coordinates, which would have been in and around here. And I've just realised they look like two wee eyeballs. That was not intentional. The Erebus, even though further away, was the first one to be found in 2014, followed very shortly in 2016 by the discovery of Terror. The wait would not be in vain. The research team sent down the advanced bots to look at these two ladies, and what loomed in front of them were perfect time capsules. They even boasted their names gilded in gold along their sterns as they came out of the darkness. Crockery still sat stacked on wooden shelving, the men's sleeping quarters and beds, which even showed off the carving and the intricate work of the joinery of the time. Bottles sat in niches on walls filled with God knows what fluids, and artifacts like tables and chairs, and where these men would have spent their days was fully on display, relatively untouched. The only damage occurred whenever these two ships got crushed by the ice when they were ice locked, and whatever damage on their descent to the seabed. But apart from that, they were perfect. And one of the most astounding discoveries was when the bots went inside the vessels. I was so excited because the Terror, probably, I have to admit, my favourite out of the two, probably because of her name, the HMS Terror, and Crozier, probably my favourite captain out of the two because he had this kind of ruffian, heavy drinking Irishman character. His foreboding table still sat in the middle of his living quarters, proudly taking up the majority of the space in the room. A solid wooden structure, a really impressive desk, And along with other things, this would have been normal through the eyes of this man under dim candlelight back in 1845. He would have woke up and seen these artifacts that we were getting to look at as the bots went through his cabin, his chest of drawers, and some of the drawers were even slightly ajar, which gave this tantalizing peek into paperwork, no doubt navigational maps and maybe diaries that he kept himself. But it's the thought of this captain spending his days in this room that we were getting to now see, perfectly preserved in time, that he probably would have got drunk in. He probably worried in her. He would have maybe even been reduced to tears at his desk, God knows how many times. And no doubt this is where he spent his last few moments bidding farewell to the old girl before he had to give up and leave her. The team of researchers do hope that over time they will be able to retract some more artifacts from Erebus and Terror that may give them a better understanding to perfect that timeline of the doom of the expedition itself. But in my opinion, I was really into the whole Franklin expedition before they were found, and I can remember the announcement on the news that they had came across the Erebus, and I was just enthralled with excitement at this, because I personally believe that it is one of the best nautical finds since the Titanic. So there you go. Kind of sad, but also eerie discovery in the seas of the Pacific of the Franklin expedition. Stay tuned and join me in my next video for more unnerving tales, and I will see you soon.